This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 169 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and special thanks to Private Internet Access. I've been a customer of Private Internet Access for 3 years now, and I love this service. I was at a security conference a few years back, and I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and immediately my endpoint protection software started alerting me that I was being attempted to be hacked, and I guess you could expect that from a security conference. But anyway, I launched my VPN from Private Internet Access, and all the attempts just stopped. My data and the internet connection is now secure with Private Internet Access, and I've been using their service again for 3 years, and I love it. I love the fact that you can choose different geographical locations, so you can test things like how your DNS is resolving and use it for many different reasons. But that's one definite use case for the different geolocations that you can choose with Private Internet Access. And you can get your VPN starting at $3.33 per month. Yes, that's right, $3.33 per month by going to geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders, today on the show I've got Errol Doebler. He's the founder of Leader 193, a leadership consulting firm. He's also the author of a book called The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership. And as you guys know, I'm a science freak, so we're going to talk about that. He was also a former Navy SEAL, a former FBI agent, so we've got lots of good stories we can get into. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about this Wim Hof method that you've been doing, because I'm very interested in the breathing, the cold, and how that all ties together, and especially how you've tied it into leadership in your book. So we want to talk about that too. But welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's super excited to be here. And there's always time to talk about cold, breathing, and how it relates to leadership. So we will definitely fit that in. But thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you've gotten to where you are, what your journey's been like. You can hit some of the highlights, like the Naval Academy, moving through to the FBI and everywhere else, and why you started Leader 193.
Yeah, I'm from New York, and when you're from New York, and somebody asks you to tell me about yourself, New Yorkers always seem to have to say, I'm from New York. So that's kind of obligatory when you're from New York. You have to say, first and foremost, I'm from New York. So I grew up in Long Island. I grew up near the water, so massive water fan. We'd be at the ocean every day during the summer and usually during the other parts of the year as well. I went to the Naval Academy. I played lacrosse in high school. Went to the Naval Academy, played lacrosse there. From the Naval Academy, I was commissioned as an officer, and I went to drive ships. I was a ship driver. They call it Surface Warfare Officer. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a SEAL, but that's another story. But I was able to laterally transfer, they call it, into the SEAL teams. Went through BUDS training. I spent 6 years or so in the SEAL teams. I did 2 deployments, and I was injured. I planned on making that a career, and I got injured on deployment, subsequently medically discharged, and spent time in private sector kind of licking my wounds and healing. I was in the city on 9/11, lost my brother-in-law there, and just a lot of stuff. And that was the moment I said, I've got to figure out how to get back in this fight. I got myself medically cleared, joined the FBI, worked primarily counterterrorism operations around the world, which I love doing. However, I did not love the environment or the leadership culture around the FBI, and I decided that I was not going to just sit around and complain. I was either going to try to do something about it, which is impossible in that type of bureaucracy, or just leave, right? Because I'm never going to sit around and complain about anything. And so then I started my leadership consulting firm. Leadership is what I'm passionate about. And if I had such a big problem with the leadership somewhere that it forced me to leave a job that I love, then I think it's worth devoting, my life to talking about leadership with people who actually care about it, want to get better. And that's where we are today. So that's kind of a linear, A to Z. There's lots of bumps and turns and twists inside that story, but that's pretty much it on paper.
Yeah, and I know I guess most of the people that are listening to this audience that come from a tech background have probably if they've ever encountered a cyber attack, you've probably interacted with the FBI at some point, and Mike
right.
can understand exactly what you're talking about. Because
Yeah.
I know my interactions with them have been short and not really that sweet, but
Well,
they've been always fun.
it's stressful when we come knocking at the door, and I was
Yes.
always aware of that especially when we're talking to, for lack of a better term, a friendly,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're like, you've got to be here for some other reason. What aren't you telling me? And like, look, trust me, I promise you, I'm just here because I want to hear what you have to think about this thing, because I know you have some expertise in it, or you were tangentially, involved in some way, not in a bad way. And it takes a little while to, oddly enough, calm down the innocent people, the good
Mm-hmm.
people, right? Because they're like, what did I do that I didn't even know? Why are you here?
Yeah.
The bad guys and girls, they get it right away. So they go right into the mode that they go into. But the good folks, takes them a little longer to settle down.
Yeah, I got involved with the InfraGard group here in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was I guess they're kind of led by the FBI for cyber security, and that's kind of eased my nerves a little bit about it. But you're right. Whenever it's just like when you get stopped by a cop, you're always on edge. Where sometimes maybe they're just telling you, hey, there's a tail light burned out or something simple. But
That's right. God, please don't send me to jail.
yeah, exactly. So now you got injured, right, in the Navy SEALs, and that's kind of one of the reasons why you had to get out of that. What was that feeling like, and how does that maybe shaped your life? Being on the sidelines for a little bit of time, kind of having to change your identity and no longer being a SEAL. What was that like?
It was tough because, as with most things that are tough in your life, if you go about it the right way, you kind of look back and you go, thank goodness that happened. Mm-hmm. Maybe not so much in the moment, but it was a big moment for me. I was embroiled in a terrible marriage at the time. I got injured, and your reputation is everything in the SEAL teams, and things just were falling apart around me. Now I was going to be on the sideline for a while because of my injury, but I didn't have to get out. I could have said, look, I'll stay in and I'll add value in any way I can. There's administrative tasks that needs to be done. I just want to support the mission. And I had so many things falling apart around me. I just kind of, tucked tail and said, I'm out, and it was a really difficult period in my life. And I had identified myself as a Navy SEAL so strongly. And now what? Now what am I? And that was really good for me, because when I tell people all the time, you've got to be careful about what you identify yourself as, mm-hmm. because if it can be taken away, then you probably need to change your focus. And that goes to really everything. And this is a bit of a morbid example, but my sister died several years ago of cancer, and my parents, they really obviously struggled with that. And it just kind of made me think, like, well, if they tied themselves to being the parent of my sister, well, she's gone. Well, what now? And it was just kind of now I never said that to them, obviously, but it brought home to me from a personal level, you've really got to be careful what you tie yourself to, because if it can be taken away, then what? So what can be your identity that really can never be taken away? And I think in many forms, a leader is one. Mm-hmm. You can be a leader anywhere. You can be impactful anywhere. Somebody can't really take that away from you, your spirit and so on and so forth. So that's the long answer to your question. It was very difficult for me, and given a total set of circumstances. If my personal life was going fine, I probably would have stayed in. I probably would have been like, yeah, look, I just want to be part of it. But everything else was so tough. So that transition became very hard. But like I said, if you handle it correctly, I started to kind of turn into a positive. I started to figure out, gosh, I had this opportunity. Where did it go wrong? How did I get myself in this situation where I just made the decision to leave when perhaps I didn't have to? And that was good for reflection. And it really started to turn my life around for the better, understanding where I did things wrong and where I could improve. So, in many ways, it was a blessing. I wouldn't be here today. But it was painful. It was painful for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I used to always, tell people, oh, I'm a developer, I'm a software developer. And that was kind of like the intro when I was giving a talk somewhere. It was, I was a developer, I build apps, I build website, whatever, and then when you get into, as you grow in your career, you get promoted higher and higher, right? And then eventually you're leading a development team. You still want to identify as being that developer, but then you're leading an entire department, and you've got help desk folks and engineers and developers, and you can't identify just as that developer anymore. And that was really kind of challenging for me. I know it's a very minor thing. So now when I introduce myself, I say, I'm a tech leader, it's not something that's going to change. I'll introduce myself as a dad sometimes. I'm a tech leader and a father of 3.
Yeah, yeah.
And then get into it.
And it's funny you mentioned that part about you're identifying yourself as a coder, because I've focused a lot of my leadership business on tech. So I hope I can add a lot of value to your listeners in that standpoint. But what we're finding, and you already know, is you started getting promoted, you became a leader, no longer a programmer, but you couldn't shed the label. Mm-hmm. And that probably hindered your ability to lead those coders and programmers, right? Because you wanted to still be right down there showing how much you knew. And so you never, or a lot of tech leaders who get promoted just don't make the jump from coder, programmer to leader of programmers and coders. And there's a massive difference.
Yeah, and it was really hard for me. I know when I got promoted, I wanted to, I didn't want to get away from the code. I wanted to stay in there. I wanted to keep grinding with the team. I want to show them I'm one of the guys. But, then you're also like, you have a different persona because you're their boss now. And that, they look at you a little bit differently. And also, you wanted to do it better than them. And it was really hard to delegate. It was just a super challenge. I remember the first real time that I noticed that I wasn't focusing on leadership the right way. I was just trying to, be in there with the team, is when I had 2 people quit on the same day. And it was just like, and at the time I had just gotten assigned a mentor at work. And, I'd been a manager for, well over a year, but I wasn't a very good one. And I always had high turnover rate in my team. I just always attributed that to the fact that people are, jumping ship in tech because there's lots of other companies in Charlotte. The banks are here, they're paying more. And I met with my mentor and I told him what happened. He's like, well, why do you think they left? I was like, well, the banks are paying a lot more. He's like, it has nothing to do with salary. And I said, well, why do you think they left? He's like, because you're a bad boss. And I was like, what? That kind of opened my eyes to, I need to focus on something else.
Yeah. So there's a lot in that statement alone. I want to be one of the guys or girls. In the SEAL teams, that is the first challenge of a young leader, because you go through all the same things. The officers and the enlisted go through all the same training, and your mission is really tied to being very close to everybody. Trust, and to build trust, you have to be right in there with everybody. And they always warn the young officers coming in, you have to separate yourself in some way, shape, or form. You cannot be one of the guys. You cannot be out there drinking with them and, blah, blah, blah. And of course, just about every young leader ignores that and says, well, I can do that differently, right? I can be different. Well, you can't. And the reason you can't is because there's going to come a day that you're going to give an order that somebody doesn't like. And they're going to go, come on, bro, I thought we were boys. Yep. What's up with that? And the second that happened, I'm like, okay, that's what they're talking about. And you have to change it. And then that now becomes even harder, because now you've got a harder hill to climb to get past that thing. And I remember I just said it up front. I said, fellas, I've got to change the way I'm doing things. And here's why. And it doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I don't want to go out and party and drink and carouse and have a great time. But that happened when somebody questioned my order because they thought we were boys. We can't have it. And everybody was cool. They were like, yeah, right. That's what officers are supposed to do. They got it. They missed me going out with them. It didn't mean I couldn't go out and share a couple beers. It didn't, you know what I mean? But then at some point as a leader, you have to move away, mm-hmm. right? And that's the challenge. And that's exactly where you were, right? Does this apply to tech and tech leaders? Exact way. I want to show them that I can still do all this stuff and I can do it better than them, and let me get in there because, well, no, that's their job to do the coding, not yours anymore.
Right.
And that is, and you created an environment that people didn't love just by doing that. And I tell people all the time, stop caring about if people love their job. Care about if they love the environment you've created as a leader. Because if the environment is no good, people will leave a job they love, like I did with the FBI. I loved that job, but I didn't like the environment. So it's kind of, it's applicable everywhere.
Well, that's one thing I liked about, in your book, you talk about culture and culture and the actions and the behaviors that associate with that. And I think, and I've had a few people on, we talked about culture before, and that's one of the difficult things I think in tech is to build a strong culture. You see other great cultures and you try to emulate them, but you've got to do something that's unique to yourself too.
Yes.
And I think, understanding and figuring out where your values are, at least for me, you also talk about emotions. Emotions are one of those things that I'm not good with. I'm just not good with empathy. I'm not good with emotions. I'm not good with those kind of things. But I have to spend time to consciously think about them and figure out what was I feeling at this point that made me react in that way, because obviously there's something there. I may not be in touch with it. I may not know what it is, but I've got to get there. And all those kind of also drive what your culture is that your team is all about. So I think putting all that together in your book was really important, especially for people in tech that are like me that may struggle some with those connections.
Well, I appreciate that you appreciate that, because it's a very important part of my leadership process is the emotional awareness and recognition, because emotions drive our actions. And if you are not aware of the inherent emotion that is driving your actions, and you're just acting randomly and you're hoping that the result works out. So what does that mean, right? And then ultimately, those actions that are driven by your emotions is what make up your culture. That's why I tell people about culture. Mm-hmm. Culture is made up of the things you do, not the labels you put on. We have a culture of excellence. We have a culture of trust. We have a culture of innovation. Cool. Put whatever label you want on it. But if you can't tell me the things you do that make that culture excellent, or make that culture innovative, or make that culture trustworthy, then you don't. You're just putting labels on it. You don't have that culture, right? You're just naming it. So to understand the emotion, and we get very bad at that, and I tell people, don't judge your emotion. You're allowed to have the emotion, but you can't recognize how you're acting unless you come to grips with that emotion. So I go in, I feel insecure. Okay, that's a really hard emotion to swallow, that you feel insecure, but now you get to make decisions. You could say, I feel insecure, and normally when I'm insecure, I overcompensate by being loud, or I try to do everything myself, or whatever it is. Now you're recognizing your personal culture. Wow, that's what I do. Holy cow, that's my culture. Now you get to decide, what do I want to do? And now let me move towards that. And you can't start making those behavioral changes until you recognize the inherent emotion and what you do on that, right? So I feel insecure because I don't want my team to think that I don't know enough. Mm-hmm. But wait a second. When I do that, when I act on it, I get in and I micromanage and I do their work, and now people are leaving. That's a bad culture. So what do I want to do? I want to sit back. I want to encourage them to do it themselves. And it's going to be really hard for you to do it, but you've made a conscious decision now on a behavior. So yeah, that's the process, right? And that's for every decision you'll ever make in your life.
Right. And you've got to follow. And I think, for me, it was more like I had to almost learn that was the right way for myself, because I wouldn't listen to anybody. And I think that's one of the things that, and maybe that's because of the ego. You become a good coder, right? A good developer. You write some good apps. You have some good successes, and that's why they promote you, because you've done some good work. And you have to realize that, you don't scale. To be a leader, you have to be able to scale. For business, you have to scale out. And just me coding, I don't scale. And I can't work but so many hours a week before the work sucks. But if I can give people the opportunity to grow and to mature and to take ownership of their own things, then I scale, and I can scale my culture. I can scale the way that I lead if I give people an opportunity. I set up guidelines. I set up like bumpers and bumper bowling, right, and let them bounce around in between them. But I have those lines there. And I think that's one of the things that, you have to work on when you're developing that culture, is figure out where those boundaries are.
Well, absolutely. And you have to define what they are. You have to define very clearly what those guidelines are, behavioral guidelines. I expect people to behave this way. I expect them to take initiative, whatever it is. you can't hold someone accountable if they don't know what they're supposed to be accountable to. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody goes off and starts acting the fool, whatever that means, you can't really justifiably reprimand that person if you haven't made it clear what you expect from them. Because that behavior might have been perfectly fine at their last job. They might be like, well, what are you talking about? So you've got to make it clear, right? And then how do you scale? Scaling means a lot of different things. But from a leadership perspective and what you're talking about, again, and all I'm doing right now is walking you through my process, my leadership process. We then use a planning process. The elements of a planning process, we say we don't do anything until we plan. And then when you put out the plan and use the elements, what mission are we exactly trying to do? What actions do we need to take? Who's in charge of each action, right? It's a very definitive process. I bought it over from the SEAL teams, watered it down, modified it to make it, much simpler. But then that allows people to be aware of what they're accountable to, and you scale because now everybody, it's laid out. Here's what everybody's doing based on this mission. Mm-hmm. And me as the leader realize I can't do all these things. I have to assign people to do these things. And now we can start doing multiple missions, working on multiple projects, because now we let the plan tell us how many we can work on. And now you're scaling that whole thing, right? You're scaling the breadth of the work you can do. You're scaling the ability of everybody by focusing on a certain amount of work and letting them know how much work is possible. You're scaling their professionalism. I mean, that's all it is, right? But only if the leader sits back and does the things that we just talked about and recognizes, it's not just all about coding.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what you talk about is that your first step is, awareness, getting that awareness and recognition. Yep. And I think, being self-aware was one of those things that I didn't even know that was a skill. Yeah. It's like I didn't even realize that, that is a skill that you have to have. I thought, just everybody's self-aware, right? No. And I wasn't self-aware. I thought I was until people start pointing out things that you do and you start paying attention to yourself and start paying attention to, oh, I do react that way and I need to figure out why. What's the root behind that and how do I fix that?
That's right. And so this might be a nice little segue to start talking about the cold, because I use the Wim Hof method in cold exposure to help people practice these elements of my leadership process. Awareness of emotions and what you do. So guess what, right? How do you practice something like that? When you are staring at a bucket full of ice, water, and with the knowledge that you are going to step into it, I can promise you one thing is for certain. You will have an emotion, okay? You will have an emotion and you will do something. All right, now you are practicing emotional awareness and recognition, cultural awareness and recognition. So what do I mean? Whoa, I'm about to get into that ice bath. Let me just look around. Oh, wait a second. I've got to clip my toenails first, right? Oh, wait, hold on a second. I've got to just check this email real quick. Oh, that's what I do when I'm stressed. I find other things to do, right? You start to learn about yourself, okay? Then you decide to finally step in. So now you procrastinate when things are hard and you do these things. Now you're aware of that. The emotion, I'm afraid, right? What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of how I'm going to react because I don't want to be ashamed of myself for not getting in. So all of a sudden now you're going layers of emotion. I'll be ashamed of my fear, and if I don't go in it, so I'll make an excuse not to do it that I can justify to myself. But deep down, right, you're feeling that. So right off the bat, you go into an ice bath every day or a cold shower every day, and you have that intention, you're working on that self-awareness. Now, when you get in, it's a whole new set of things. What do? Do you yell and scream? Do you curse? Do you clench up? Do you find an excuse to get out? Or do you focus? Do you focus your energy and attention on your breath, right? All those things which will serve to calm you down. That's how we use the cold in that one aspect, just to be aware of the things we do, perhaps under stressful situations, right? And stressful situations vary from all of us. Does that make sense, right? That's
yeah,
a good segue into the cold, right?
So let's back up just a hair on this cold stuff. How is it that, well, first, how long do you do a cold bath? If you're going to get in an ice bath, how long are you in that thing?
Yeah, generally for about 2 hours. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, my God.
Just kidding.
5 minutes, maybe?
No, yeah, the rule of thumb is, there's a couple rules of thumbs. First of all, you want to stay in, as it relates to gaining control of yourself, gaining control of your mind, right? Being calm. You want to stay in until you find control of your breath. Okay, so when you get in, the first thing that's going to happen is, right? Okay, now look, if you're in the cold, the physiological effects, what's happening inside of you, are still happening, regardless of whether you're panicking or just not being calm. So that's fine. That's good. Some good things are still happening, but we want to go past that. We want to get control of the mind, the spirit. We want to learn how to focus our attention. So if you can stay in for as long as it takes for you to go from to, that's a good amount. Okay. How long will that typically take? It varies. But when I bring people through my workshops and I tell them beforehand, hey, I'm going to get you all breathing and calm in this literally 30-degree water, they don't believe it, but we do it. And it generally takes the average person who's never done something like this before, 45 seconds to get control with some good coaching. And then I tell them, look, now you've got to work to maintain it a little bit. You got it. Now keep your mind focused. And then I might ask them to stay in another 30 seconds. So it's not long. You don't have to stay in long, okay?
So it's not like Wim Hof where he's in there for like 2 hours or something.
And what he's doing is he's not being egotistical when he does that. What he's showing is the limitations of the body, which we have put on ourselves. He's showing that I can control my core body temperature even in the ice, which he does. So he's doing it from a complete scientific standpoint to encourage others to say, stop putting limits on yourself. This is the way we heal ourselves, right? Through the breathing and the cold exposure. This is the way we get control of our mind, body, and spirit. This is the way we tackle things like anxiety and depression without any type of narcotic. This is how we battle disease that we really create in ourselves, okay? And this is how we get rid of it, right? So he doesn't do it to say, look at me. And no, we don't have to spend 2 hours in the ice bath like Wim Hof. Okay.
So, what's the technique when it comes to breathing? Is it like rapid breaths? Is it deep breaths? Is it slow down your breathing? Because I haven't dug too much into. Well, first, who is Wim Hof? Like, maybe we tell the audience a little bit about that. We've been talking about it as if they all know, but maybe they've never heard of the guy.
Yeah. So Wim Hof I guess he's described, for lack of a better term, he's from the Netherlands, a Dutch extreme athlete, right? And he was kind of labeled that because of these crazy things he did. He climbed Mount Everest in a pair of shorts, right? That's Mount Everest. He ran a marathon in the desert with no water. He spent the 2 hours in the bucket of ice water, in the tub of ice water, without his core body temperature changing. These are all extreme things. Now, he had a purpose for doing them, but that's, for lack of a better term, how he was described. What his purpose was, again, was to show that we have control over our autonomic nervous system and our innate immune system, which is attached to our autonomic nervous system. And again, scientists never thought that was possible. And until he forced them to do an experiment on him where they injected him with an endotoxin, a simulated virus.
Wasn't it like Ebola or something? Or something similar to Ebola? Or...
Well, I think, whatever it is, it's a dead virus that they injected him, and the body doesn't know the difference. The body recognizes it as a real virus. So they call it endotoxin. I don't know if there's different types of endotoxin, I don't know. But what will happen is the body will react and you'll get sick and you'll have fever and chills and all that stuff. And what he did was he breathed his way through it and didn't show any effects of the endotoxin. And then, because they said, well, you're Wim Hof, you're crazy, so you're 1 in a million. And he said, nope. And then they did a real controlled experiment, and they had a control group who did the breathing and cold exposure for 5 days. That's it. He taught them the method. And then the group who didn't do any of the breathing, and they injected the folks who did the breathing method before the endotoxin was injected and during it, and then the group who didn't, and everybody who did the breathing technique beat the endotoxin, and everybody who didn't got sick for science. They're literally rewriting the science books on that now. So that segues into your question about the breathing. So the breathing method is not, it is a deep, aggressive breathing method that serves a very specific purpose. And that specific purpose is to reset your autonomic nervous system. Okay, so you have yoga breathing. That's how we want to go through life, right? Mm-hmm. Nice, gentle breathing through the nose, through the mouth. There's all sorts of breathing techniques out there, right? Box breathing and whatever it is. All good, okay? But they serve a different purpose. The Wim Hof breathing is literally, it's almost like a hyperventilation, but it's a controlled hyperventilation, okay? Right? And you have to, if you do that for 20 minutes, the science has showed that you literally reset your nervous system, which means you flush your body of inflammation, which is caused by stress. And inflammation is now shown to be the key driver in every major disease out there. Depression, anxiety, cancer, Alzheimer's, rheumatoid arthritis, cardiovascular diseases, everything. So when we use this breathing technique for 20 minutes a day, we reset our nervous system, flush our body full of the inflammation, and that's how we fight off disease, right? We die from infection, we die from virus, not because of the virus itself, but because our immune system overreacts. It overreacts because we don't exercise it. How do you exercise your immune system? Now the science tells us by doing this breathing. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's science, but it's not rocket science, right? And it's now it's a scientific fact that this breathing does that. And in this age of COVID and everybody's scared to death, right? And they're closing places that they should have open, like places to go to get physically better. That's a whole different topic. If you breathe, if you practice this method, you have no fear of COVID because your body will react appropriately to it. Mm-hmm. It won't stop you from getting it. You get a virus if you get a virus, right? There's no stopping that. But how your body reacts to it, you have complete control over. Now the science tells us that this breathing strengthens the immune system and doesn't overreact. It just takes care of business, right? The white blood cells, it suppresses the immune response, but the white blood cells are still working, right? So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah,
I went off on a tangent, I think.
No, I think it's really interesting because like I said, I just finished that book, Breathe, and they talked about box breathing. They talked about breathing in through your nose. For like the perfect breath is like 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or something to that effect, or whatever. Right. But then he hinted a little bit about Wim Hof. He talked about the experiment where he got injected, and the fact that he was able to run through the Sahara, and get in ice baths and all these things without his core temperature changing, which is just remarkable. But then it is all because of the breath. And he said this technique had been around for thousands of years, and people kind of just forgot about it when medicine came about. They didn't realize that this was already there. And I found this just super fascinating. Right. As a not really about leadership per se, but it is very interesting. And I guess you can tie that together though when you talk about being able to understand and control what you're feeling.
That's right. It is absolutely leadership because here's what happens. Okay, when you get into an ice bath, it's an induced panic attack. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's chaos. And now, what do the best leaders do? The best leaders remain calm amidst the chaos. The best leaders are able to focus on what needs to be done, still see a wide picture, right? So they can see all their options. Those are the best leaders, and to remain calm. How do you practice doing that? You practice doing that by getting into an ice bath, right? Now, when you do that every day and you practice that, you make that a habit, and you go into work and there's a stressful situation, your mind goes to a place. Okay, I'm starting to get stressed. That's okay. I know how to handle the stress. Let me breathe deep. Let me exhale, because exhale, I know, activates something called the vagus nerve, which serves to calm us down, right? You just go through the whole process. Mm-hmm. So not only does it have something to do with leadership, it is a vital element to practicing those most important elements of leadership. So not only does it make you healthy, it makes you a better leader, right? So again, and it's not a stretch. I use it with all of my clients. I do workshops, leadership workshops on it. We do straight Wim Hof workshops. It's foolproof. People who practice it become better leaders because they learn how to remain calm during chaos.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, we've had a whole bunch of chaos recently, with COVID, and there's a lot of companies, who have had to mobilize a workforce where they've never been mobile before. And that's a lot of stress on technology departments to say, hey, now you've got to allow, X number of hundreds of people into your network when your whole goal has been to keep people out of your network. And now how do you let people in safely? How do you protect? And I know a recent conversation that I did have with an FBI agent not too long ago, he was telling me that they've seen, roughly 30% increase in cyber attacks since, March mostly because people are loosening up their networks a little bit because of COVID. They're letting more remote work that they didn't do before, and they're not doing it properly, and it is causing some issues. So, we are in a stressful situation. And one of the things I like that you talk about is that, once you have your process, and I may leave a step out here or there, but I think it was, about emotional awareness and recognition, building a good culture, planning, and then, I guess going through the resistance, right? You're understanding the resistance that you have there. And even when in crisis, you continue to do that. You just may have to do it at a faster pace or a little bit quicker or slightly different, but you're going to continue to go through every step.
The process of leadership should never change. And if you're changing significantly your leadership style when things are good, 5 months ago or 4 months ago to today, if you're leading much differently, then there's a problem. Why is there a problem? Because the process is the process. You will find, I developed it. I didn't develop it in a sterile lab, right? I developed it based on everything in my life, right? And I've been in combat, many different forms of combat. I've seen about as much stress as you can see voluntarily, right? And so when things go right and when things go wrong, when I had to put my leadership consulting firm together, I had to just, say, well, what do I believe? And I went through, I said, you know what? These are the elements that always come up. And if you account for these elements in leadership, you'll get it right, or you'll know why you got it wrong. All right. So, again, emotional awareness, recognition, culture. What do we do? Behavioral guidelines. How do we decide we want to behave based on what we've witnessed? What is our plan? I understand the resistance. There's some science behind that we can get into today or some other time. But the point is, that's still the process to make decisions and lead. Understand what I'm feeling, what actions they drive, how do I want to act, what's my plan? Okay. Now, you might have to make those adjustments faster because of the circumstances. The emotions might be more intense. Okay. But and the planning may change because circumstances around you change. So there's a need for a new plan, but you still need to do all those things. And that's why process is so important, because in moments of stress, you go to what you know. Mm-hmm. And my question to you is, what do you know? And I say, no process. Know this process. Because when you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Good. Start with emotions. You're scared to death. Good to know. Now I can make adjustment. Right. And on it goes. So, when I say your leadership shouldn't change at all during these times, people look at me like I'm crazy. And then I explain why I say that. And they go, well, I guess that does make sense, because it does.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think you mentioned you go with what you know. I think if you continue to practice the good principles during the difficult times, when things, or during the easy times, when things get difficult, you kind of can go on autopilot. You're going to go through the same steps, and now you're familiar with it, you're comfortable with it, and I think you're either a good or bad leader in both good times and bad times. You're not just a good leader in good times. If that's the case, and you were a bad leader in good times, you didn't quite get there.
100%. And when this thing started, and I was talking to all my clients, and I would say that to them. Oh, Errol, what do you think? I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, stop, process. Let's go through it. And they, to a person, okay, and there was enough of them where I felt good, like, okay, that my stuff works. To a person, they were like, yes, you're right. I've got to focus more on my emotions, but everybody else's emotions and how they're acting on them. Right? And they just went through the process. I said, just go through the process every time. And what this is going to do is it's going to calm people down, because you're going to tell them, because you have that leadership language now. When you follow my process, that creates a leadership language. So as you, the boss, get in front of everybody and you say, and everybody has been indoctrinated into this process, you bought in, you've made it your own, and you get up and you say, okay, look, let's make sure we understand our emotions on this. people aren't going to look at you like you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Or my emotions are fine. You check your emotions. No, they're like, okay, no, that's the process. That's the language we're speaking. And now everybody goes, yep, we've got to focus on that, because if we don't, God knows what we're going to do, right? And then on it goes. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, one of the things that struck me when you talked about the resistance was I read a book a while back called The War of Art, and it was talking about that.
Yep.
You need to go through the resistance, and sometimes the thing that you want to do the least is the thing you need to do the most. And you find yourself, moving towards whatever it is that you don't want to do. But if you do that thing and you overcome it and you get through it, you're going to be better off in the long run. Is that kind of where you were coming from with that, or is that one of the thoughts you had?
Well, yes or no. And the resistance, I took that exactly from the book, the War of Art. I love that book. I can't remember the guy his name, Pressfield.
Yes.
Wrote that. And it's a great book. Anybody who's listening should pick it up. It's an easy read. And I just was like, yeah, the resistance. Why do people? So I have a bit of a different take, although I agree with everything he said. And I was trying to figure out a different word to use. I'm like, well, that's the right word. I'm just going to use it. And even in my book, when I say the resistance, I end note his book. I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to be sneaky, but I use it in a couple of ways, right? The first thing is, as a leader, you have to understand if you're gonna adopt my process, there's going to be people are not going to do it. They're going to, even though it makes perfect sense, people aren't going to like it. So you, as a leader, have to understand there's going to be resistance to things that are just so obvious, and you can't understand why. So first and foremost, just be aware of that, because it's new behaviors, new changes, new way of doing things, and people generally resist that. Now, the science behind it is when we say the process, the art, and the science of leadership. My leadership process literally follows the pattern the brain uses to rewire itself. Okay, now I just found that out as I was writing the book. I was about 3/4 of the way through the book, and I'm very into neuroscience and how the brain works. And then I realized, wow, wait a second, my leadership process follows this. I have to put it in there. The resistance in that area is the brain. We wire our brain ourselves. Okay, we are born with a set of wiring. But we're the ones who hardwire certain things, okay? And that's now science, right? So when we say to somebody, we're going to change a behavior, we're going to do something different, okay? They're hardwired probably to do something differently. And the body just doesn't let you change, right? When you have an emotion, the brain literally sends a chemical to the body. Now you feel the way that emotion is, and then you act on it. And you become addicted to that emotion and those actions. You literally become neurochemically addicted. And when you become neurochemically addicted to an emotion that drives certain actions, your brain wires that way. And if I'm asking you to do something differently that makes perfect sense, and you just simply can't do it, or you're really struggling, I, as the leader, for one, need to understand, well, that's the resistance. They're just, right now, they're rewiring their brains. I need to be patient with them. Okay, I need to be aggressive to get this message across, and I need to hold them account to the things I'm asking them, but I need to be patient. As an individual, when you're trying to do something better for yourself in your life, I'm trying to be more patient. I'm trying to have more gratitude. I'm trying to do whatever it is. I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to get my eating habits. Whatever it is, it's something that you're not doing. So with the knowledge that I have hardwired myself to feel and to act a certain way, I have to give myself a little grace as I'm going through this process, because I'm literally rewiring my brain, and my body and brain will resist this because it's an addiction. So you can cut yourself some slack, right? And understand, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm not doing this. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I suck, right? It's just because it's hard, and the brain, I'm rewiring it. So that's the approach I come at with the resistance. It's the general philosophy that Pressfield puts forward in his book, but I like the science aspect of it better, because it gives some people some grace with others and themselves.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand that it takes time. It's not, I've looked at people and thought, wow, this person's really good at, doing something, at speaking or whatever, and don't really realize the fact that, well, they've had lots of experience, lots of practice. It's not just something that's necessarily natural for this person. It may seem like it is, but it's something that's going to take time. And like you said, rewiring your brain takes time. It takes effort. It takes energy. It's going to take some time. So, like you said, have grace, work through it. Understand that you're getting better every day. It may seem like you're flying around in that same circle, but you're maybe flying at a higher altitude now.
And that's why when people tell me, the people I work with, at some point, they're gonna say to me, Errol, it makes sense, and I didn't think it was going to be this hard. And my only response to them is, welcome to leadership. Right? That's why leadership is at a premium. That's why a great leader stands out. Not because people just decide to be a great leader, but because of the amount of work it takes to do these things is really, really hard. And that's it. That's it. So we've got to have some grace. We've got to understand why things are so hard sometimes. And now the science allows us. The science around neuroplasticity tells us these things, and we can say, all right, cool, I got it. Yep.
Awesome. Well, Errol, tell people how they can find out more about you, pick up the book, and connect, and just continue this process of learning the art and science of leadership.
Yeah. So you just go to my website, leader193.com. You can pick up the book there or on Amazon. The process, art, and science of leadership. The subtitle is How Leaders Inspire Confidence and Clarity in Combat, in the Boardroom, and at the Kitchen Table. You can learn about my leadership consulting business, my executive coaching, my retreats, and then my Wim Hof practice as well, because I run just separate retreats for that. So everything's there. I'm on Instagram. Anything at Leader193, you'll find me.
Awesome. And 193 was your BUDS class, right?
That's right. So I ended up graduating with class 194, but my Hell Week class was 193. And we started out that class with 200, and at the end of Hell Week, we were down to 10. So that it was such a great experience in my life, and I just wanted to always kind of stay connected to it. So that's why I named it Leader 193.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate having you on the show. It's been a lot of fun. Definitely want to have you back, and we can talk more about this stuff as time progresses. But thanks again.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome, and I hope you do have me back, because I want to talk to the tech teams out there about how we've employed this process with teams, and they're going from struggling to crushing it. So it would be my privilege and honor to come back, and I hope I hope we can do that. But thanks for this. I really enjoyed it.
Yep, I appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. And don't forget that you can sign up for private internet access for only $3.33 a month. Check it out at geekleader.com/VPN.